Hi, this is yours truly, Clarissa talaga, Clarice. And today's the 28th of September, 2020, the last Monday of September. And next week, actually on Thursday, it's going to be the 1st of October, my birth month. And hopefully things, my birth month will be so kind to us. Anyway, this is a special episode for me, Talk to Clarice, because I want to be able to reach out dun po sa mga kababayan ko who have supported me from day one. Hindi nila ako nakikilala in person. Nababasa lang nila yung mga ina-upload ko. Siguro pag pupunta ako sa Metro Manila, I would get curious glances here and there. But there is no place for them to approach me. There's no place for you to approach me dahil may malaking technical gap na ngayon pa lang ma-address. So, it means, nung nakarating po sa puntong ito, maraming desisyon ang kinailangan. My decision, the decision of other people, to stake out their reputation, to stake out their life and liberty para ma-cross yung divide, para magkaroon ng ma-fill up, para magkaroon ng how should we put it, ng tulay, so that pag nagkaroon ng event at magpakilala ko sa iyo. Hello, my name is Clarice. I hope that we can work on something that we find agreeable na pagsisimulan ng mas malaghanap at mas makatutulong na samahan or pakikipagtulungan. Hopefully by that time, na-address ang mga balakid why it cannot happen at this time. So, today na nagkaroon ng first deliberation, unang araw ng deliberasyon ng budget ng buong bansa sa lower house. So, kung saan pinag-usapan ang magiging budget ng bansang Pilipinas for 2021. And also at this time, ano pang mga news natin? Napakadami. So, bilang pagsisimula ng paghahanda or not pagsisimula, bilang paghahanda para sa pagbiyahe ng mga provincial buses sa Metro Manila, papunta sa Metro Manila and kasama dito ang Calabar Zone. Ngayon pa lang ikinakasa na ang mga gagawing ang mga IRR, ang mga the health advisory at kung paano matutulungan ang mga negosyong ito para hindi para maano nila yung cost, ma-shoulder ng operation nila, ng limited operation ang cost at hindi sila huminto dahil malulugi rin lang naman sila, di ba? So ngayon pa lang ikinakasa na siya. Dahil sa Wednesday, that will be the first day of going back to the street ang mga provincial buses, di ba? So for my part, this is a very special recording because gusto kong magpaliwanag at gusto kong ipaliwanag sa mga sumuporta sa akin, sa mga tumulong sa akin, kung bakit may mga decision na gagawin ako sapagkat ito po yung mga ipinangako ko at kung bakit ako nakarating sa punto na ito. Ano po ba yung punto na ito? Whenever I would, before the pandemic, before nagkaroon ng COVID-19, lagi po ako sa Metro Manila kasi inaasikaso ko yung business. And I would get curious glances from passers-by, sa mga nakakasabay ko po sa mall, sa paglalakad, mga, ano ba yung mga tingin na mga curious and at the same time hindi ipapahalata because there is no way for you guys to approach me dahil may great divide. And kinailangan ko po ng tulay upang makarating sa kabilang dulo at magkaroon ng hindi putol na daan. I want to explain to you the reason kung bakit po maa-address na ang technical problem na yan dahil hindi lang mga action ko at hindi lang mga desisyon ko ang naisaalang-alang, ang nabumuo ng tulay na ito. Kung hindi na, madaming tao po ang gumawa ng tulay upang makarating sa kabilang dulo, upang maging two-way the communication, the collaboration, upang pag may lumapit kayo sa akin, sinabi mo, pwede magpatulong, ganito ang gusto kong gawin. At nakita ko po na talaga maganda ang advokasya nyo at hindi ako mangingimin na tumulong at ako rin naman hindi ako mangingimin na lumapit at magpatulong sa inyo. Meron ng paraan, merong daan upang ma-avoid yung mga technical problems kung bakit nahihinto ang ganitong pagtutulungan between us. Syempre, may mga tao po na nag-stake ng kanilang life and liberty and resources upang nagbaka sakali, natutupad ako sa sinabi ko, nagbaka sakali na pag, if they put the resources where their mouths are, may kakahinatnan ang pagtitiwala nila. And so dumating na po sa point na to. So why do I need to apply for passports? And that's with S. Syempre, before pa ako mag-apply ng passport from other countries, I will apply for a Philippine passport first off. This is just a backgrounder. Gusto ko lamang po nang ipaunawa na hindi ako tumatalikod kung ano po yung mga inilahad ko before, my willingness, more so at this time, dahil kung noon po, di ba, parang pinagtagpi-tagpi lang, parang I just pluck them from nowhere, and then pag pinagtagpi-tagpi ko lang, at sinabi ko, this is going to make sense. If this had made sense to me, tingnan nyo rin po kung bakit ko sinabi na, my articles, my videos, can find a way to reality. And so, yun po. Wala na po, hindi na kayang bilangin ang number of times when I had introduced my parents and when I said that I'm the firstborn of my parents. So, that's also how I'm, I have the gall why I have the gall to say that I don't think any one of us is immune to the political bug, especially when you breathe into it for a greater part of your life, just like how I had been. I too had entertained that dream or possibility, and I told my father I had to begin big, like in the Senate. Senatorial candidacy, Clarissa talaga. So he said, why not start with the first step, with the small step. That happened one mid-morning. He came over our place kasi he was wondering why I was not going out just like before. What was I thinking? What was I feeling? Diba? So he came around, nakipagkwentuhan, and nagkakwentuhan kami as father and daughter. Although even then, very the great divide, he was convinced of something and being the father, and I was convinced of another being the daughter. So at that time when he said, you should start with small steps, baby steps, and the arrogance of youth, I remember shaking my head and I said, no, I don't like to, I don't follow you, because what I had back then, 2004 to 2006, I believed I had the best platform to launch a national campaign. Yeah, so parang, because I did, coming from the planting season, I thought it was going to be my harvest season. I was doing all the works. Talagang, I was only sleeping siguro 6 hours. And I was working overtime. There were lots on my plate, and that I had to multitask a lot. So when I thought the big break came, I thought, because I deserved it. The feeling of being entitled, the feeling that finally my hard work had um, provided the harvest. I thought that, all the sacrifices that instead of me taking pleasure in whatever cash income that I would derive from, doing um, odd jobs on the side, I would spend it buying the gadgets. I even sold my car for that. So all, the whole family had to chip in terms of sacrifices, diba? So we lost the only car that we were using because I had to buy Sony camera, I had to buy Matrox editing machine. So although hindi siya utang, still the sacrifices talaga malaki from the whole family. So when the big break, when I had smelled something in the air, parang, oh my gosh, this is it. This is my big break that I've been praying for, that I've been working hard for, and that my father represented the stumbling block. So how was I to regard, the good intentions behind his, wise words? Syempre, I did not. I could not see. I could not see how I could pick pieces. Parang the how I could have. I did not find a way to discern. What to digest his words. So I threw everything away. On hindsight, from that living room setting with my late father back in 2005, we were mouthing proverbial party line. I said proverbial because that's how I'm going to use a symbolic analogy. It's like a party, two political parties who are trying to find settlements or something, a common ground on a very divisive issue. So he was mouthing the party line of the seniors, and I was mouthing the party line of being the person who had worked hard for what was coming to me. So we were in conflict with each other. The party of alternative, uh, the party that as the party that's espousing an alternative reality or alternative narrative alongside the party that I presumed myself to have. You know, for instance, a very concrete illustration was uh, what happened during those times because in 2005 I was always the equivalent of IRS. I was closing down the business, dimensional picture video production. So I would not be penalized with yearly and annual taxes and other delinquency penalties because I could not continue the business. I did not have the money, and our family life had too many confrontations already because of that very contentious times. Plus, I discovered that in music, I could lose myself. I could lose the stress, I could do that without shelling out money because it's with me. It's the music I create. It's creating out of nothing, right? So my father has said that's fantasy, and he's quite right because um, how can you make something out of nothing? Because you have to start from an idea, non-material. You weave from your fantasy, from your internal internalization of the things that are happening, right? So I was busy with my music, and but I also have the sense to go back to initiate the closure because I know that there was nobody who will tidy up after the mess. That if I would let go of the ball, it will haunt me. There's nobody to pay the penalties except moi. So I was there all the time. But the narrative that my father was espousing back then would negate my presence at the BIR, where I was taking care of, yeah, the business side of it. And I was very, very hurt. And I must admit, there were times that I would lose it, not in a way that would be so disrespectful, but um, I will not exert, 101% to make myself agreeable and pleasant in contradicting him, my father. So I did not also put in the effort, the best effort to make myself not come out as just like a brat, because what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. That's how idealistic I have been, and that's a fault. Um, there are ways and there are ways, and so I was described even then as the Lone Ranger. So I would call it the party of the Lone Ranger because uh, I was really considering nobody because I really felt entitled. So if I was really, but I have this to say for myself. If I was really serious in being a senatorial candidate in 2007 for 2007 national election, I would not have spent so much time recording and writing for foreign international market. They will not and cannot vote for me. So anyhow, 15 years later, how does that living room setting that truly happened, how does it compare to the present realities? Well, the hard slab of reality says that number one, I have issued promissory note to RDO 60, the IRS of the Philippines. The BIR, for us, it's the Bureau of Internal Revenue, for not being able to provide proper closure to dimensional pictures video production, just like what I had intended to do in 2005. Number two, that I've managed to pay just once in 2018 after a negotiated settlement so that I will be allowed to open the business, talaga information and business consultancy. Because the TIN, the tax, what do you call it, identification number was the same. So there are other concerns like another team which belonged to Golden Arrow Publishing, but that is another example and illustration of how lost of records had carried over entirety. It had changed and altered my life talaga, as if nothing would remain the same. As if nothing would remain the same. So my father had passed on in 2016, and I'm still around to learn from the many mistakes of Lone Ranger without Tonto. And so, my realization, the next bullet, number 4, is a government position is not something that can be promised by anyone, as even if you are called, the kingmaker, the best campaigner, or the most influential group who can support and who has the track record to show for it. A lot can happen. So a government position is not something that can be promised by anyone, especially if it should be won in an election. Diba? A promise to support is not necessarily a promise that will be kept throughout the process. Diba sabi sa election, even if it's just 2 days before the election, a lot can still happen in that 2 days. So a promise to support is also not the same as a promise to make you win. So if somebody said, I will not even go there. Next, number 5. At times, something can be dangled before us. A feeler, a word of encouragement, and because of a great desire, because we want it to be true, we can supply the missing qualifying terms, in that we will convince ourselves, we will delude ourselves that this is actually what is being said, when in fact a review of it will reveal that it's just a one-sided commitment, diba? And so for me, as soon as I realized that I am leading on, that I was promising something that that it's not within my power to deliver, like being a candidate, and doing something, I check myself, uh, the reality check, because reality bites. So I would not backtrack, but I will hit the reset button and go from the lesson learned, which is do not delusion. I I watched a movie, and yeah, it carries over. Stop deluding yourself. Clarissa, don't delude yourself. Listen intently to what is being said and what's not being said. And so, nothing helps more than recording what is actually happening. Because if something is recorded, be it through a video recording or a black and white communication, we chances are, even though it's going to be painful, even though we may have built ourselves up, worked, diba? We are so worked up about it, and then reading something that can make the crash to the hard pavement painful, but in the long run, it's going to pay off. It is better to be, in my experience, it is better to not be confrontational, but to err on the side of caution, in that I will not mislead myself. Okay, I will not mislead myself by building something in my mind which is not reflected in the reality. And that's one of the things that I have learned with dealing in having a relationship with my father, that because my father can be so frank and so direct, that in those times there were no gray areas. My father did not spare my feelings, and the feeling had been mutual because I was as blunt with him. And the curious thing is that characteristic between father and daughter will not work with other father and daughter who may have a different language of love or understanding between them. That is so okay. But for us, especially in his last days, he would not hide his displeasure with me, and he will right there and then correct any misconception, and he will ask me to explain if I have done something, if I have said something, and it reached him. He would immediately lay it down, confront me, and ask me to explain. And so I have been taught by the best in matters that need that's would need a tough emotional capability to absorb and to listen to the hard truth, the hard reality. So when there is something like, the English term, stringing along, oh, you're just stringing him along, or oh, you're just stringing her along, dragging, because it's obvious that someone is dragging his or her feet, until a more rewarding time, probably. I could, that is very unsatisfactory, and that is so unacceptable for me. So even though in the days to come that I would be confronted with leading someone or stringing along somebody, I guess that is one of the things that I can commend myself with, as I've been trained by my father. And so I would ask for explanation in the same way that others would literally close their ears, because I would be explaining a lot, because I really don't want to be misunderstood and to to lead somebody on, if I will not be intending to to deliver. So that goes through with relationships. And so I can say that, the effort of my father to drag his feet and to string me along, they did not pay off because that his strength, that is not his strongest trait. You know, there were days, there was a year, I think it was before I was sent to Seagull's rehab facility, that he would come over and he would be bringing um, one course of action after another, and they were coming from all directions. Really, just you could see the painful way he was doing it. He was trying to find a middle ground. He was brokering a deal. He was trying to get me off from what he perceived as me sulking, being depressed because I was staying at home. I was waiting for for a communication. I was waiting for, I told him I was waiting for a lot of things because I needed a break. I was working so hard in the year 2000, 2001, 2002. I had the chance to, to take a breather and get my acts to put my acts together so that I would know the next courses of action. But he either he deliberately misunderstood me or that he was persuading me to do to a course of action that I would not budge. And so there was one time because he was living with my stepmother, Tita Gina Talavera in Doña Oria. And so we are living in Pleasantville subdivision. So after quite some time, there was one time that he came over and he told me that if I was interested, he could offer me a job, that I could write for a publication. But there's a catch, it's going to pay well, but there's a catch that I would have to write anonymously or using a pen name. That really, it that got to me. What father will have that condition to his own daughter just for her to be able to work again? If a normal father, if there is no extraordinary situation covering on top of the relationship, or if there's no extraordinary factor that's causing, having influence in father-daughter relationship, why would a father hide the identity of daughter who is known in the publishing? Why the need to write with a different name or totally, anonymously? Who will get the credit? Who will get the byline or something like that? I asked myself, why would he not be proud if I suddenly again make a name for myself? If I do it well as a writer. But so those were the things that had caused impasse, that did not break the deadlock. So we were back from zero once again. So he would leave me and then he would be back a day or two with another proposition. So what if I work here and there, so and I would say, just answer me this, why would I go all through that when I have done my part? And I really, for the life of me, I could not understand where he was coming from. So, because I know for myself what's in my identity already, having started early in the business with my mother. And so what's my identity? Even then, my identity has a market value and financial statement in the real world, which I would have gladly bow out of if only I was given a safe passage out of the image and reputation I was beginning to I was beginning to earn, coming from, you know, different sources, from past friends, past associations. Really, parang all of a sudden, my life was being rewritten and I couldn't make sense of it. What was happening? That was in 2004, 2005, 2006. So, and then finally, when I got to Seagull's Flight Foundation, there, I have learned nothing could be more plainer than what I was relied, than the information that had been said to me and in my presence. Like, what kind of work could someone suffering from clinical delusions and clinical depressions, uh, what kind of work will allow me, to go back to my old byline, my old books. If I would be allowed, if I would want to come back to the publishing, there was no way, uh, there was no possible way for me to go back to them if I do not object to the diagnosis and prognosis that were being enumerated and itemized before me. Wow, parang it was really the time for personal knowledge and confirmation. So it happened in 2007 while I was in Seagulls. And so when I graduated, after I had graduated and came back, were the things that were awaiting me. And so the question, was she still talking to herself now that she had graduated? Would she still talk to the walls? Diba? Would she still abuse her kids who are bigger and the bone structure, and in terms of strength, at least two of them are athletes, full-time athletes. So how does someone with anger management be able to espouse any advocacy that will not be attributed to going over bounds, to losing it, to going through another breakdown? So there was really no way. If I would condone it the first time, there was no reason, there was no way for me to repudiate them. And that what will be the first time will have the second time, the third time, and the clinical and the psychological disorders would build until I would be at the mercy of those whose voice can be heard by the authorities and whose authority will not be contested, diba, by anyone. And so I had needed talaga to think my way and to be careful about how I was going to live my life with that label, with that diagnosis. So I was thinking, if I would, the acquiescent, if I would be so timid and cooperative and not assert myself, what about my love life, in relationship? What if the suitor who will not want my answer, my genuine feelings for him, what will stop him from dialing a hotline number just to get back at me for any hurt or humiliation caused by my rejection? From dramatizing, exaggerating, and having a false feedback to hurt me because I have the record. And if I would not manage to overturn it and to vindicate myself, I would be forever vulnerable to those spiteful and vicious feedback. So I had to stand my ground. There was no other way. The backlash and as object of retribution was one of the many unintended consequences of being identified and classified outside of my real identity. I will not be able to defend myself and say my piece and live side by side with another human being in an open society if I will live as somebody else and that my file is in the possession of someone who has an interest over me, over what's mine. So I would be forever vulnerable to predators, just like the trafficked women whose control over their own bodies and lives are being held in control by some kind of persons of authority. That it can happen even with the best of intentions, diba? So sometimes it's not a matter of negotiable intention or motive. Sometimes, just common sense. If I will be assigned with different name and that name somebody has a custodial or proprietorial rights over that name, and the law enforcement will listen to that and will not check and verify, oh boy, I would be at the mercy of whoever will be the most imaginative manipulators. So I almost pleaded with my father, leave me something that will make it worthwhile for me to live for, to continue living in the way that I had known life to be. From, you have raised me to be independent, you have raised me to think for myself. Why stop now all of a sudden? And if you will take away everything from me, leave me with something authentic that I can rebuild on. Don't take away everything from me. So that was probably I have not managed to communicate that in the best ways possible because I was emotional. And so it was misconstrued as a suicide watch because I have termed, in my poetic and in my manner of words, I did not stick by, the masculine and the hard terminologies that he is used to in politics, but I came from the literary and I was a TV producer, I was a director. And so we have different, in that essence, we have different terminologies. So in various ways, I was saying that if I would begin again, and that I would take at face value his offer to help, and that his encouragement for me to go on, live my life, and forget the past, give me something to equalize the deficit in my characterization, which had been so torn to pieces down the gutter from the sexual perversion into, money management. I was not left with something that I could build on again had I wanted to. And I had wanted to please him. I had wanted to look for ways to find ways, to have, to arrive at a where we can agree on what we can agree on. So it would have been okay for me, to work gratis, to work freely, and he will be the one to give me my allowance. But why the need to assume another name? Why the need to vacate all of my IDs and credentials? For whom will I have to do that? For whom will I be doing that for? At least give me some answers, diba? You have raised me, it's as if I was talking to my father at the time. If you have raised me to think independently, to think for myself, why would you not give me the answers that will pacify me, that will give me peace of mind for the things that you want me to do for you, diba? So the deadlock was carried on for years. Why would I need a reputable ID and credentials in eternity, diba? So I mean, the things that I had needed, the things that I was explaining to him that I had needed, I would need it in this lifetime. I will not be needing them in the afterlife. I need, his support, being my next of kin, being my father who has taken the cudgel in place of the absentee husband and father to my children. So I was really, really doing my utmost to find words to explain to him, and ganon din siya. He was also finding it difficult to talk to me. But in all that, every time he would come over, we would end up discussing the really heavy stuff. Because like one afternoon he came by, he told me that, you told me that you're waiting for a confirmation of that your work had paid off. But what if, a postal communication from the US and from Sweden, what if they don't arrive? What if, in spite of the things that you're doing, what if you've waited all the time that you have waited, still they didn't arrive? What will you do? So those were the things, the hard truths that I needed to consider. So he was not, he was very blunt about it. He did not spare my feelings, how I would react. And after hearing that, after listening to him, how did I react, really? I reacted to him in that afternoon the same way that I had reacted or responded each time that he would talk to me with, the hard stuff, the hard topics of life that we had found ourselves in conflict with. He would take side in the opposite of what I outside, I mean, at the opposite of the position or the stand that I had taken. And so after that, I told him, it may not come this year and it may not come next year, but it will come. I know it will come. That's how sure am I. But until then, I did not retorted disrespectfully. I had managed to give him the respect due him as my father. Um, Although there were 2 times and 3 times that I would really let go of the frustration, but it's letting off steam. Um, no untoward incident had happened considering the enormity of what my father had asked from me. Can you imagine the first person that I thought would protect and understand me would ask that from me? Wasn't he the person who had encouraged me to write, okay, go ahead, become a publisher, go ahead, tingnan mo kung magkakaigi. And then all of a sudden, he's singing another tune. So, considering my response and how I was able to let go of my frustration, I would still consider myself as, quote unquote, mabait. Because we still managed some quality time with each other. And it's not because of the absence of conflict, because the conflicts were there, the misunderstanding were there. I have pictures when we would go out as a family, and I really cherish those moments. So that was practically how we handled our differences of opinion, and differences in the belief system. So the opportunity was there to get our messages across each other, and both of us had latched onto that opportunity. So at the last days, when I couldn't bear to look at him, it was saved by the bell. So in the end, I believe that we have made peace with our disagreements, and that I believe that the last days, he he believed, even if at the very end we would not agree on what's best for everyone, I believe that as he made peace with it, I can say for myself that I have made peace with my disappointments and with my frustrations. And so, lesson learned. A lesson learned. Those who may be saying that I have a future in public service and that I could win an election, it would be assuming that my heart is still in it, which is not. And that the very people, who would stand in the way right now in the current times will be the same persons. Though they may change their mind, their actions also and their words were also consequential in the actions that I have taken. And that far be it from me, to disappoint those who have put their words at stake, believing that I would make good my promises. I hope to be the same person who had made those promises to you. So, minsan I'm also guilty of it, the double speak, saying something and really meaning another, intending to do another, just to buy time. It's really between us, our conscience, and our God. And rather than dwell on the motives of another person, I remember a wise advice, not to dwell on the motives and intentions of other people. Because for me nga diba, the heart is truly deceitful. We may believe something and it really is a beating for another. And kung tayo nga diba, minsan nahihirapan to know how our heart beats. Mas lalo na every day of our life, we're going to measure up, or we're going to guess the intents and motives of another person. Diba? Parang life is not best lived that way. So I would leave it behind. I would leave it between other people and their conscience and their relationship with God, uh, because it's not for me to judge them and vice versa. This is yours truly, Clarissa talaga. I hope that through things like this, I would be able, my best effort, so that my best effort to explain myself will bring about understanding, and that I will not disappoint you unduly, and that I would like to say that I am still committed to what my words had been. Maraming salamat po.